From inside the Banner offices along the snowy Inner Harbor, it is the Banner Baseball Live Chat. Paul Mancano and Danielle Allentuck. I just discovered that Danielle scraped off her car with her bare hands this morning. That's the kind of dedication you have to the Banner Baseball Live Chat. Thanks so much for braving the elements, Danielle.
Of course. My hands are a little cold, but anything for the live chat.
I'm surprised they didn't freeze off. I mean, no gloves?
3 years in Colorado.
Oh, fair.
Yeah.
4 years in Syracuse. So,
Ithaca.
Oh, true. Yeah. You have double the experience.
Yeah. 7 winters in a cold. So I can handle this.
Wow. Yeah, you're getting through it. We are going to talk baseball to get you through this snowy Tuesday afternoon. We're going to be giving our very early predictions for the Orioles opening day roster because spring training is just about a month away. I know that a lot can change over the course of a month, and certainly there's more free agents that are still to be signed. There are trades that could still happen. I fully expect the Orioles to go out and trade for another starting pitcher, as they did last year, late in the offseason, getting Cole Irvin. But as it stands right now, we're going to take a look at the 40-man roster and try to piece together a 26-man opening day roster with what they have. 13 position players and 13 pitchers. Danielle, shall we start with catcher? Because that is the easiest position to predict.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's no arguments in this one.
Yeah.
It's just going to be Adderley and James McCann.
Yeah.
There are no other options at this point.
Sorry, Samuel Basayo, your time is coming.
2025, next year, there could be some options, but it's going to be those two again.
Yeah, absolutely. So check that box. Moving on to the infield. Let's talk about the very large amount of options awaiting Mike Elias and the big decisions that are awaiting Elias and manager Brandon Hyde here. Danielle, I think we can say confidently that Gunnar Henderson's going to make the opening day roster.
Yep.
I think we can say Ryan Mountcastle is going to be your opening day first baseman. I think we can say that outside of those two, then you start to get into Ryan O'Hearn, if you consider him an infielder.
I think he's a lock.
I think he's pretty close to a lock. First base, can play a little bit of corner outfield. Certainly showed quite a lot of pop last year. Resurgent season for him. After those three, it starts to get a little bit interesting. Who else made your opening day roster in terms of the young guys?
Okay. I mean, I see Jordan Retsburg as a lock to me. I think he showed a lot. There's a reason he stayed up after he got called up last year.
Yep.
He's very steady. He can play second, short, and third. I think he's a lock in my mind.
I agree. He just brought too much defensively. His hitting was just steady. I mean, when we saw other guys like Colton Cowser, who we'll get to, Joey Ortiz kind of struggle at the plate, Westberg was just doing enough, and he may never be, an all-star caliber player, but he is certainly a very valuable player for this kind of team right now.
Exactly. He fills a role. He can go in any spot. I think he's a lock. And this is where it gets a little spicy on my list.
Okay.
I don't have Jackson Holiday making it.
Okay.
For one reason, I think he's going to be up there next year.
Yep.
I think he'll be up there by the All-Star break. But he played in less than 20 AAA games, and I just think that the way this team operates, they're going to say he needs more time there. I think he could be up there by the end of April even, but I just don't see him making the opening day.
I think it's a total toss-up at this point because all last offseason, we were talking about how much of a lock it was that Grayson Rodriguez was going to be in your opening day rotation. And even Mike Elias said it was pretty much his spot to lose in that opening day rotation. And then he struggled in spring training and did not make the opening day roster. And certainly he was very frustrated. I think the Orioles, honestly, that was not the outcome that they were hoping for or expecting. Now he came back up and made his debut a week later because of an injury to Kyle Bradish, but was bouncing back and forth between AAA and Norfolk, didn't fully grasp that spot. I think you could see the same thing with Jackson Holiday.
Right. And I don't think it would be making a statement like we don't let people go straight to the majors. Like, I don't see it as that way. I see it as them just being like, they're not going to bring him up until he has a spot where he's playing every day.
Sure.
You're not bringing up the top prospect in baseball to sit on the bench. So they're going to wait until they're fully confident that he is ready to start every day at either second or shortstop.
Yeah. And there's a chance that he struggles in spring training. And if he shows he's not fully ready, I think there is a chance. I do have him making my opening day roster.
Okay.
Because I think one big factor is if he makes the opening day roster and he goes on to win Rookie of the Year, the Orioles will get draft pick compensation, as they will with Gunnar Henderson. I think that is a factor. And I also just think the way that they talk about Jackson Holiday's maturity
Mhm.
to me says that they expect him to grasp the spot in spring training and not let it go. And I think that there is an opening for him at second base. I think, if he lights the world on fire in spring training, he is going to be this team's opening day second baseman.
Mhm.
But I also do understand them saying, look, we're going to go with the group that is going to help us win ball games right away.
Right.
We're not as concerned right
Mhm.
now about getting him up and kind of rushing him to the big
Mhm.
leagues. We want to make sure that we're right in the thick of things in the
Mhm.
AL East to start
Yeah.
the season. And if, Jackson Holiday, who has just a handful of AAA games,
Mhm.
isn't ready, he won't do that. However, he's making my team. I think it's fun if he makes my team.
It would be fun for everybody. I
Yeah.
mean, I agree, but I also think he's the type of guy where they're not going to send him down. They want him to be fully ready. I think it would do more harm to bring him up and have to send him back down and have him go up and down a bunch of times.
Yes. And that's always a concern. And it happens with
Mm.
top prospects all the time.
Mm.
I mean, people were calling for Adley Rutschman to be sent back down to
And
AAA.
Gunnar last year,
Yeah,
last April and May, and he
absolutely.
won Rookie of the Year. So
Yeah, it's always an adjustment period. It's
Mm.
always like that 6 week to
Mm.
8 week period where they're still adjusting to major
Mm.
league hitting. Even if Jackson Holiday doesn't make this opening day roster and he comes up in May or something, he could still undergo that rough
Yeah.
transition. Do you think if he doesn't, now he's not making your opening day roster
Mm.
according to your predictions, which you'll have on the
Mm.
BaltimoreBanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months. How early does he make his debut if he doesn't make the opening day roster?
I mean, I could see it in May. Like, I could see it very early. I think he needs about a month more in AAA. As of right now, we'll see what he
Gotcha.
looks like in the spring, but he didn't, breeze through AAA like he did all the other levels. His numbers were good. He hit around 260, but I think that they could say he needs a little more time.
Sure. So if he is not making your team,
Mm.
who do you have taking his place
All
on
right.
this opening day roster?
Fans aren't gonna love this one,
Okay.
but I think Jorge Mateo makes the opening day roster again.
I agree.
They love Mateo. They love his speed, his versatility. He did show a little pop early last year in April.
And then never again.
But he has it in him. He
Sure.
maybe this will be the April it happens again, and then his spot will get removed by Holiday eventually.
Right.
He's a great defender. And Hyde has said multiple times that, to them, having somebody you can trust at shortstop is a little more important than having somebody you can trust at the plate. So
Sure.
it's that key of a defensive position for them.
Yeah, I also have him making the team. I thought at this point at this point last year, I thought he was going to make the opening day roster. He did, but I thought at some point after he hit his May onward struggles, I really thought that they were going to give Joey Ortiz a shot to take his spot.
I did too, especially around August
Yeah.
when things started to slow down and looked like they had everything locked up.
And just the fact that they continued to stick with him,
Mhm.
and credit to him, he made the postseason roster.
Mhm.
He had several
Yeah.
hits in game 2.
They already signed a contract for next year. Like,
Right.
obviously, they like him.
Yes, they like the aspect. They feel like he is a chess piece that they can move around. Defensively, he's gotten some experience in the outfield as an absolute emergency situation.
Mhm.
They clearly like him. I don't know if personally I would stick with Jorge Mateo on this roster, but given everything that we've seen from Brandon Hyde and Michael Elias, they continue to give him opportunities.
Right.
I don't know if they'll continue from game 1 to
Mhm.
162 this year, but I just don't see him missing this roster as it stands right now.
I see him as being there until Holiday's there.
Okay.
Because somebody's going to have to go, and they're going to need a 40-man roster spot.
Right.
So it would work out pretty well.
Right. And I think that they would ideally like to get something for him. I don't know what that would be. I don't know if you can acquire a whole lot for Jorge Mateo, but maybe it's one of those deals. Maybe it's a DFA cash trade.
It's also
something like
not that expensive of a contract.
Sure.
I think it was about $1 million. So, which, for the Orioles is a lot of money to discard, but it's in the long run to make room for Jackson Holiday, it's not that much.
Yeah. And he is a legitimate weapon on the base paths. And he is a solid defender. It's just, can you stomach the low batting average every year? All right. So far you have Mountcastle, O'Hearn, you have Jordan Westburg, you have Gunnar Henderson, and you have Jorge Mateo. That's 5 infielders so far. Who else do you have?
I have Kobe Mayo.
Okay.
For one reason, because I think you need a third baseman. on this roster. You need somebody else who can stand in there. Jordan Westburg can play a little bit of third, but in the way I have it lined up right now, he's your starting second baseman.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like you need that. Kobe hasn't debuted. He's not on the 40-man roster, but he has that pop, that power potential for you. He's a pretty good third baseman. He's learning the outfield. He can do a little first if you need him to. That position's a little crowded, but I just see him coming into spring training and just taking that spot.
Wow. I think this is a fiery take from you, Danielle.
I know, yes.
I mean, we are a month away. A lot can happen between now and then. Why Coby Mayo and not Ramon Urias?
I just feel like we've seen all we've seen from Ramon. And I feel like, they tendered him a contract, like they did with Mateo. So obviously they want to give him a chance in spring training. But I just think Coby Mayo offers you more. And I think that, third baseman, it's obviously defense is key, but I think Ramon doesn't bring as much at the plate as Coby could.
I think Mayo certainly has a higher ceiling right now than what we've seen from Ramon Urias.
Yeah.
I get the argument that we've seen a lot from, we've seen enough from Ramon. The fact that he went from 16 homers in 2022 to 4 last year, even though the batting average was about the same, almost exactly the same,
right,
in the 260s. The sapping of his power was really shocking. I don't know exactly, and you can't blame the wall because he had the wall pushed back in 2022.
Yeah.
I don't fully understand, and almost the exact same amount of games. I think it was 118 in 2022, 116 in 2023. I don't fully understand where Ramon Urias' power went last year, and I think that's something the Orioles have to worry about.
And also his defensive abilities went down too. He was a Gold Glover.
He was, yeah, and he was a positive WAR player. 1.8 according to Baseball Reference, but certainly the numbers took a dip last year. I just wonder if this is a situation where, you talk about Jackson Holliday needing a little bit more seasoning and the Orioles saying, let's give this spot to a veteran. I just feel like they're going to want to make Coby Mayo or Joey Ortiz earn that promotion and, take the spot from Ramon Urias.
Well, I think he's going to in spring training.
Okay.
Gotcha. I mean, that's my prediction, that he's going to come into spring training firing it off and basically give them no choice but to put him on their opening day roster.
Okay. I think it's fiery. I don't, it would take a lot. I mean, I think that, but he's certainly capable. I mean, the exit velocities that he produces, the power potential that he has, and the rocket arm that he is reported to have at third base as well. And like you said, can play a little bit of corner outfield, can play some first base. I think that we might see Coby Mayo at some point this season. I just don't know if it's on the opening day roster. And I think Urias is another player that the Orioles, if they would like to move him, would like to get something for him.
I mean, I could see them moving him during spring training.
In like a minor trade?
Right, yeah.
Okay. Maybe like trade for a smaller reliever.
Even like catch considerations.
Wow.
Yeah.
That would be quite the twist. But we've seen it from Michael Elias before. He's made trades like that in spring training. All right, so Coby Mayo makes your opening day roster.
Yeah.
Who else just missed the cut for you other than Jackson Holliday?
I feel like Joey Ortiz is kind of the guy who's always on the line, but never quite gets past the line.
Yeah.
He got such a brief look in the majors last year, and I never quite understood why he wasn't called back up. I know that there weren't a lot of injuries to the infield. It's already pretty crowded, but I feel like if they wanted him to be a major league player, he would have been up there at some point.
Yeah, you just have to feel for him because look at Joey Ortiz's numbers in AAA. They are out of this world.
And they weren't bad in the majors.
No.
I thought he played well.
Yeah, I mean, he hit about 211, but he really got a tiny sample size.
Right.
I mean, I think he got 30-some plate appearances, 34 plate appearances, 33 at-bats. Yeah, I mean, so he really wasn't given, a whole lot of run in the big leagues.
15 games too, so he barely played.
And from everything that we've heard, we saw some flashes of it last year, can play all three defensive positions in the infield, second, short, and third, at an above average level. Has enough speed on the base paths. I think had double-digit steals last year in AAA. And his numbers, he may never hit 30 home runs in the big leagues, but he's going to hit for average. He's going to walk. And you just wonder what else he can do.
I just feel like his downfall is he's not flashy.
Right.
And I think Jordan Westburg and him are kind of in the same category where Jordan Westburg's not flashy, but he's steady. Right. And I feel like Joey is kind of the same lines where, he's not super flashy. He's not going to, wow you every game he plays in, but he can get the job done.
Yeah.
I just think Jordan Westburg is just a little bit better than him, and I think they'll make the reasoning now that Jordan Westburg is also more experienced in the majors.
Yeah. Westberg, a better draft pedigree.
Mhm.
He has he's a little bit bigger, has probably a little bit more power potential.
Yeah.
May not be quite the defender, but yeah, I think they like
Mm.
Jordan Westberg just a little bit more right now
Right.
than Joey Ortiz. But you also do wonder if, because you're looking at this roster and Michael Elias is saying Joey Ortiz, we just don't have room for him, if he ends up being a trade piece.
I mean, we've been saying that for weeks,
Right.
and nothing has happened.
True.
So
Yeah, it's just it's something to keep an eye on, certainly.
Yeah.
Okay, so he does not make it. Joey Ortiz does not make it. I think Connor Norby is going to be close.
he's a good one.
I just don't think, unless there's severe injuries, I don't think you can justify him making this opening day
Agree.
roster.
But I could see him at some point next year. If somebody gets injured, he's the guy who gets called up, maybe.
Sure. The fact that he has not really played shortstop or third base, maybe a little third, but
Yeah.
hurts. He can play outfield, but he's really more of a second baseman.
Agree.
And so that's where
And Jackson's obviously ahead of him.
exactly.
So,
Yeah. He got leapfrogged by Jackson
Right.
Holiday, which is tough. All right, so that's the infield.
Mm.
Outfield wise, certainly some locks. Austin
Yes.
Hayes is a lock. Cedric Mullins is a lock. Anthony Santander is a lock. Barring a trade or injury, those three guys are certainly locked in. I went with 5 outfielders. Did you also go with 5?
I did, yes.
Who were your other 2?
All right. I think we're going to disagree on this.
Okay.
I went with Heston Kjerstad.
I had him too.
For
Yeah.
his DH ability.
Sure.
I think maybe, a day game he could sub in right field, but as of where he was at the end of last year, they don't trust him defensively yet.
Right.
Maybe
Day game with the Shadows out in the
I just mean like it's a day to give a veteran a rest.
Certainly, yeah.
I don't see him playing often in the field unless major things change this offseason and he put a lot of work in. We'll see that in the spring. And then my 5th one is I think a little controversial. I think because you have Heston making the team as primarily a DH candidate, you need a strong defender on the other end.
Sure.
I don't think Colton Cowser is there yet. I think he will be there by the end of next year. I think in 2025, he makes the team. So then you have Ryan McKenna and Sam Hilliard, who are your 2 primary defensive outfielders. And I think it's going to be close between the 2 of them. But I've seen both of them play. And I think Sam Hilliard is better defensively with a little more potential at the plate.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is shocking to me. I think it's also just shocking because the Orioles have that experience with McKenna.
Right.
Hilliard just joined the organization. He's a little bit older. He's 29. McKenna is 27.
Right.
He does bat left-handed. The Orioles love their lefties.
Yes, they do.
I think they're going to be loyal to McKenna here if it comes down to the 2 of them.
Yeah.
And I think McKenna still brings you some speed on the base paths.
So can Sam know.
So can Sam.
Yeah.
I
think that they're very similar. It's the problem.
Right.
And neither have options.
Yeah, that's a huge range.
Yeah. I think it's a toss-up between the 2 of them.
Interesting. I think Cowser deserves to be in this mix too.
Yeah,
I really do.
I think he's like the first guy out,
Okay.
But I just don't I don't think he's ready yet. I didn't love what I saw from him in the majors in his first, little glimpse. I don't think that means that, he's not an everyday major league player by the end of the year, but I don't think he's quite there yet.
I think that he might be closer than he showed last year. Another guy who, like Ortiz, he got a little bit more of a leash than Ortiz did.
Right.
But I think he just did not get enough opportunities at the big league level. Cowser didn't to be able to show it. What they do with McKenna and Hilliard is going to be fascinating because being out of options, are you really willing to, if you go with Colton Cowser in your outfield and you've got Mullins, Hayes, Santander, Cowser, and Kjerstad, are you really willing to let both those guys potentially go? It would be, that's quite a lot of talent to just kind of walk away from.
Yeah.
And the Orioles certainly like to give themselves as many possibilities. I do. The one point I agree with you in terms of Kjerstad, I think the fact that he came up at the end of last year, I think that they believe that he is ready.
Yes.
I think it's also interesting to see if there's, too much of an overlap with him and Ryan O'Hearn because they play very similar. Maybe O'Hearn is certainly more of a first baseman than Kjerstad is, but
right.
left-handed power
Mm.
is essentially what both those guys are supposed to be bringing. But I do think Kjerstad makes the team. But it's what they do in the outfield is going to be fascinating.
And I think the argument of Hilliard and McKenna, going back to similar with Mateo and Ramon, is that they tender them contracts.
Right.
So, they obviously have some interest in them where they want to see what they look like in the spring.
Yeah.
So I think if they didn't have them on their list of potential people who could make their opening day roster, why would they even bother?
Right. Yeah, they wouldn't get somebody who is arbitration eligible. They would probably take a flyer on somebody else.
Yeah.
Going to be fascinating to see. My 5, I have Hayes, Mullins, Santander, McKenna, and Kjerstad.
Okay.
Just because I think that they're going to try to hold on to McKenna for as long as they can. But we'll see exactly how it shakes out. In terms of the rotation, who is and again, this is the area I think the Orioles will address. So I think that the group that they go into spring training with or go into opening day with will be different from the group they have in-house right now. But who do you have as your 5?
All right, I feel like you have 4 locks here.
Yep.
You have Kyle Bradish, Grayson Rodriguez, Dean Kramer, and John Means.
Yep. In some order.
Yes. Probably similar to that order, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
I think your 5th spot is where things get interesting because it all depends on are Tyler Wells and DL Hall going to be in your rotation or the bullpen. And in my mind, I see them in the bullpen because, Tyler Wells was amazing the first half of last year. And then he had some fatigue and he teetered out. He had to be optioned. He didn't come back till the end of the year and he was in a bullpen where he looked fantastic as a reliever last year. And I could see him as, a setup 8th inning man next year.
Sure.
And then you have DL Hall, who has never really quite found that success as a starter in the later levels. Last year, he had to go to Sarasota in the middle of the year to kind of reestablish himself and deload and build himself back up. He came back as a reliever and also looked awesome at the end of last year.
Yeah.
So kind of my thought is, they've both tried it out as a starter and neither have quite been able to make it. And I think with Tyler Wells in particular, if you put him in your rotation, he needs an innings limit. He needs to be paced. He needs to be carefully managed to make sure the fatigue doesn't happen again.
Sure.
But then you have John Means, who is coming back from Tommy John surgery, and it's going to be up and down as it is coming back from Tommy John surgery. And he's also going to have to be paced and put on an innings limit. So I have Cole Irvin as the 5th starter because I think that is the safe option right now.
Okay. Given what I saw from Cole Irvin to start the year last year in the rotation, I just don't think they're going back to that well, pun intended. He struggled so much in his first 4 starts last year. Also a guy that had to be optioned.
Yes.
Came back up, made some spot starts, was mostly used as a reliever. I have Cole Irvin making this team, but as a reliever, I just don't know if they can go back to Cole Irvin in the rotation. But you could say the same for Tyler Wells.
Right. Well, my other thought is you could do a 6-man rotation.
Okay.
And then, you have Cole and Tyler Wells in your rotation.
Well, we saw in 2021 the piggybacking thing. The Orioles and other teams used that because we're coming off 2020 and all those guys had to be built back up.
Right.
Maybe that's on the table. I just think that this discussion is why I think it's critical that the Orioles get another starting pitcher.
It is, but we haven't seen any action there yet. So just going off their available options.
Yes.
I think, you know what you're getting with Cole Irvin. You're getting 5 innings. He's probably going to give up 4 to 5 runs every time, but you just hope that your offense makes it up.
It's a 90 ERA right there.
There you go.
That's not great. But with Tyler Wells, you're going to get, he was great for the first half of the last season. And then
And then what happened?
And then he just kind of ran into a wall. But maybe this year won't be different. I don't know.
I just don't see how it can be unless you carefully manage him.
Right. It's going to be tough. Maybe they do. Maybe they start him in the rotation and then they pick up a starter at the trade deadline. Or they have Chase McDermott or Seth Johnson or Cade Povich ready to go to take his spot. Which would be cruel in some ways. But
I just don't see the point in overworking one of your top guys.
Right. I get that. All right.
Just to have him replaced by a prospect who hasn't been proven.
Right.
And I think that their pitching prospects aren't in the same line as their, infield and outfield prospects where those guys will step up and be ready. Their pitching prospects are a little bit further down, a little more behind.
So my opening day rotation, I do have the same 4 locks: Kyle Bradish, Grayson Rodriguez, John Means, Dean Kramer. I just have Tyler Wells right now just because he makes the most sense to me. But I think this is an area that they will address either in free agency or more likely in a trade. But Cole Irvin does make my bullpen.
Okay.
I have 8 bullpen arms right now. Craig
do too.
Kimbrell obviously is a lock.
Mhm.
Yennier Cano, that's a lock.
Yes.
Cianel Perez, I think he's pretty close to a lock.
I think he's a lock.
Yeah,
Mhm.
as a lefty. Danny Coulombe, he was
Mhm.
great last year. Then that's where the locks end. I have Cole Irvin as my 5th. He is also out of options. The Dylan Tate conversation is an interesting one because did not pitch at all last year.
Right.
At this time last year, when they were doing Birdland Caravan, we were expecting him to be ready for spring training, and he wasn't, and did not appear in a single game last year. But the Orioles did tender him a contract when they had a chance to non-tender him.
Right.
And so to me, that says they believe he can be healthy.
I agree. And, they monitored him very closely at the end of last year. They had him in Sarasota. Part of me wonders if, he's one of those guys who, he could have been ready, but because of where the Orioles were in the playoffs, they're kind of like, let's be careful with him and get him back for next year. I heard a little bit about that, but I agree. I see him making a team. I think a lot will also depend on how he looks in spring training now.
Yeah.
We just have no idea what he looks like anymore. Nobody's seen him in a year.
Yeah. The last version that we saw of him was great.
Yeah.
I mean, he was one of the Orioles' steadier relievers, and they were going to be using him heavily, I think, in 2023. And then he just was not ready to go.
Yeah.
And kudos to guys like Yennier Cano and Danny Coulombe for stepping up into those high leverage situations that might have been reserved for Tate or even Michael Givens.
I also have DL Hall as pretty much a lock in my bullpen. I have Jacob Rebb.
Okay.
I think his playoff performance
struggles,
leaves a little bit of question marks.
Giving up those 2 homers
over him, but all the pitching kind of was questionable during the playoffs. So, while he was the one directly responsible, I don't know if he's the only one to blame there,
That's fair. I want to go back to DL Hall for just a second because the question is also, I think, does this team give him one more chance to start games? If they do, I think they're going to still have to keep him down in AAA and do what they did last year, which is give him as many starts as possible in AAA and hope that he figures out the walk rate, hope that he gets his command under control. But I totally would understand and frankly probably side with them if they just say, you're a reliever full-time now. We're giving up on the starter dream.
Yeah.
We'll stick you in the bullpen. We believe you can be an elite 7th, maybe 8th inning guy at some point in your career. Let's roll with this for now. But it's going to be interesting.
I think it's going to just have to be some tough love.
Yeah.
They really like DL Hall. They've always really liked him, but obviously, his body can't handle being a starter. And I think it's time to just be like, if you want to be in the majors, like we want you to be in the majors.
Yep.
It's going to have to be in a bullpen role. I know he really wants to start. I know Tyler Wells really wants to start, but maybe it's time to start being a little bit more realistic about what their bodies can handle.
Yeah. Other than those guys, I think one consideration should be for Brian Baker.
Yes. I have him as one of my questionables.
Yeah. I think he has one option remaining. He showed at times he could be solid.
Right. He made their playoff roster.
Made the playoff roster.
Yeah.
To everybody's surprise. Maybe they bring back Shintaro Fujinami.
Maybe.
It's a possibility.
Bauman.
Yep. Mike Bauman, certainly a possibility. I think the Orioles are going to continue to use the last 2 spots in that bullpen like they did last year.
Right.
Which is just a rotation of guys coming between AAA Norfolk and the big leagues. Keegan Aiken might get some run.
Bruce Zimmerman, Nick Vespi.
Yeah.
Maybe you see like a Seth Johnson come up as a reliever.
Right. Yeah. I believe Austin Voth is no longer in the organization. He was a guy that was kind of similar to that.
Yeah.
That just Joey Crable, same thing. Also not in the organization anymore, but a guy who gave them, some innings when they needed it. So I could see that. So maybe the group that they go with on opening day, their 8 bullpen guys might be a lot different from the group that they use consistently throughout the regular season.
And it's the type of thing where, you overwork a guy one night, send him out for 3 innings, and then you send him down and bring in a fresh arm.
Exactly.
Very, very common practice. The Orioles definitely take advantage of that.
Yeah. Well, I think there is certainly some question marks on this roster just because of the log jams. And it's not to say that it's not a good roster. It's not to say that this group, either one of our 2 rosters that they go into opening day with, would not be a solid group, but I
Mhm.
think there's clearly some areas that are leaner than others.
Right.
They're so heavy in terms of
Mhm.
infielders. They're so heavy in terms of outfielders,
Yeah.
and they
Mhm.
absolutely need another arm for that
Yeah.
rotation.
And I just don't see how they don't make a trade
Right.
and try to get rid of this logjam. I mean, you're hurting your own self here by having too many good guys.
Yeah. Yeah. You worry about stunting development.
Mhm.
You worry about diminishing value.
Right.
If somebody like
Mhm.
Joey Ortiz gets, more games at AAA, teams
Mhm.
maybe say, all right, let's pause a little bit. He's getting older. He's not
Right.
quite the prospect he was.
Mhm.
That is a concern. So I think a deal will have to be done at some
Mhm.
point, but they have a month until spring training.
Yep.
Then they've got another month and a half until opening day,
Mhm.
with which to work here.
They do. And, trades can be made up till the trade deadline. So we
Right.
could see movement constantly. I I do still believe they're gonna make a trade for a starter.
I
I
agree.
don't think it's gonna be C's. I mean, we don't know. I think if it was C's, it probably would have happened already. But, there's other options out there as we've discussed in previous videos, but they need a fifth starter. They need a guy who's durable and can put up solid numbers for them.
And we wrote about who we would trade
Mhm.
of these top prospects
Yeah.
for some starting
Mhm.
pitchers that could be available in
Mhm.
trade on the BaltimoreBanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months. Please give Danielle and I a follow. At D_Allentuck is her Twitter handle. I'm at Paul Mancano and also at All Banner Sports.
Mhm.
Thanks to everybody for tuning in. We will be back next week, hopefully with some more Orioles news
Mhm.
to report, and maybe with a little bit less snow.
No,
Next
more snow.
More snow,
More
sure.
snow.
We're cold weather people. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you.